Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi, and today we have another team report from Portland Regionals, and I am joined by two top players. First and foremost, I am joined by Caleb. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and for those who don't know you, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Caleb. Go by Cable Online. I've been playing since 2010, but I managed to get top eight at Portland with uh, quite the standard team. But I'm excited to just talk about the minutia of it all with you guys here today.
And I am also joined by Cedric. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah. So like Caleb, also been playing since 2010. I started in the junior division, won my first tournament, and have been going strong since then. And I'm not excited to discuss the minutia of the team with you today. Unlike my
Well,
rival Caleb, and perhaps that's why he, you know, did what he did.
Yeah.
so that is kind of what we're going to talk about. So, like you alluded to, you did it. You both used a very similar team to finish eighth and ninth at the Portland Regional Championships using Palance with Baxcalibur and Tinglu. And so, obviously, this is not a crazy team. We saw Agati get second at USC with these exact same six Pokemon. But in this video, it's gonna be a little different because I want to talk about the the how you build out Palance. It kind of underperformed this tournament, and you were two of the higher performances. And so I want to know the nuances to or the decisions that you have to make when approaching building Palance, and then how that actually impacts your game plans and how you play against a variety of matchups. Then of course we'll also talk about the tournament experience as well. But I guess first and foremost, let's talk about the team building process and why you guys chose to run Palance at this tournament.
I can start off. It wasn't exactly a choice of mine that was made. Um, I tend to, how is it? The best way to describe my team building process is I like to window shop a little too much. I like every team. And if I could choose, I would be running multiple teams at the same time at a tournament. And because of that, I have this stretch of like three, not quite back to back. There's a weekend in between regionals. So I decided to just start off sticking with the team that like kind of already exists. I was just eyeing EUIC teams and kind of just stuck with this because in practice I was really enjoying just Baxcalibur teams in general. I was kind of looking at what is it, Luca's team with the King Gambit more, but this just ended up being what I stuck with at the end.
And Cedric, how did you end up choosing your team for this regional?
Yeah. So upcoming, the upcoming weeks before the event, I was laddering pretty successfully with almost every variation of balance. There was the Luca version with the Black Classes King Gambit, the one he used in the IC, as well as the one he had used at, I think, Fort Wayne. There was Nail's team that you featured on the channel, and then there was Agati's team, and I used Paul's as well. And I was I feel like I was strong with all of them, but um, it felt like a lot of those teams had issues with Chi-Yu Bundle, which was rising in usage specifically. And I thought Ting Lu was a Pokemon that absolutely was necessary on the team for this regional. With that in mind, just be able to counter that new meta trend that wasn't as popular at the earlier events. And I kind of identified Baxcalibur to be the best sixth on that, as opposed to, I guess, Paul's winning team with Roaring Moon. I specifically chose that because of all the hail we were seeing prior to the weekend, and I thought Paul's team didn't have a prayer against hail. Truthfully, the Helping Hand, Ice Terra, Choice Specs, Bundle Blizzard really rolled the entire team, and it rolls this team too. Don't get me wrong, but at least you have a little more into it.
Yeah, definitely. And so I guess what are some of the trade offs that you experienced? You mentioned hail, and you mentioned and Chiyu bundle, I guess, were the two like primary factors that you had in deciding to use Ting Lu. Why Baxcalibur? That's the Pokemon that we've seen a lot of different variation in that slot. What made you opt for the Bax?
Caleb, do you want to go or
Yeah,
is it
sure.
towards me?
I generally enjoyed Bax in the balanced mirrors against the 6v6 mirror, or frankly like Iron Hands. Even though Paul beat Agatti's team, I did feel like this was um the balanced team that was beneficial towards the mirror. So I was looking for an archetype version that I could bring to Portland to just kind of hopefully player diff people in these scenarios. And Bax, I've just enjoyed using it all season. I got points with it at San Diego, and I'm kind of glad I got to bring it again. What about you, Cedric?
Similar. I was actually between a Hail team that one of my friends, a couple of my friends were pretty high on. It was a Trick Room Hail team with the same Helping Hand Choice Specs Ice Bundle option. And ultimately, I decided not to go with it because I thought that team pretty much auto wins against Palance, but has some shakier matchups. And I thought Baxcalibur gave not as steeply strong of a matchup into Palance in the mirror as like Hale necessarily did, but it still was a winning matchup, and so I decided for an overall more even matchup spread with Baxcalibur as my balance breaker instead of going all in on the Hale train this weekend.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then your teams, it's interesting because we talk about Palance as one team, even though there are so many choices, not only in terms of the last two Pokemon slots, but also in terms of some of the choices that you can make on the team. And so I guess let's talk about some of the differences between your teams and why you made some very specific choices. And so I think you listed it out. Caleb, you had Taunt over Substitute on your Palafin. Also, Jet Punch over Aqua Jet on your Palafin. You had Extreme Speed over Protect on the Arcanine, and then Fissure over Stone Edge on the Tinglu. So, actually, first, Cedric, you want to talk about Aqua Jet?
Of course, that's what they're all here for, isn't it? So the night before the event, I guess I submitted it Thursday night. I was submitting my teams. But like I said, I was considering a Hail team and this team. And on that Hail team, wouldn't you know it, there was an Azumarill. And so naturally, I had been entering Aqua Jet prior that night. It was pretty late. Priority water moved, the wires got crossed on my head, and I just typed in Aqua Jet. I can't blame autocorrect on this one. Obviously, I didn't type in Jet first. And yeah, I looked over the sheet many, many times before submitting it while I was mulling over between the teams, but I just never caught it. So kind of a costly mistake that was brought to my attention round 2 of the tournament. So after I won game 1, I was given a game 2 loss, and I had to switch to Aqua Jet Palafin. And yeah, I actually won the game 3 pretty convincingly, but from then on, yeah, I had to play with Aqua Jet Palafin.
Yeah, that is a pretty huge nerf, 50% less damage, but I mean, you made it work, which is very, very impressive. And we'll talk about the your tournament experience in a little bit, but other than that,
just before we get into that,
yeah,
just so you guys know, 20 base power, you don't think it's a lot, but that 20 base power is the difference between you can't one-hit KO any Flutter Mane anymore, and you also can't one-hit KO Arcanine anymore, even at neutral, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure at neutral you do not one-hit KO Arcanine with Jet Punch, and so suddenly not having any speed EVs on my Palafin ends up being a pretty big deal because all the Arcanine are going to outspeed me, so... Just one of the many things I had to adapt to during the tournament run as game plans had to change on the fly.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy that you had to relearn your damage calcs on the fly. And yeah. But let's talk about some of the other differences that you had in terms of actually building this team out. And so, like I mentioned, the Palafin other move, the substitute slot, which is kind of the flex slot. We saw a lot of haze. And I think you guys both had clear smog on your Amoonguss, just like Agati did. Whereas that's another slot where people can opt for protect, maybe even leaf storm. in that slot, but you guys both opted for the combination of Clear Smog and then a different move on Palafin, either Taunt or Substitute. So talk to me about those choices and how that impacted building out the team.
Sure. So for Taunt Palafin, I had Haze in that slot all in testing. I wasn't really clicking it even in the Doza matches just because I felt like I had that on lock with Arc9 and Amoonguss with Wisp, Clear Smog, respectively. So last minute, I just went Taunt after talking, I think it was with Raghav. I was considering Substitute. There were points in my day in which I was like, damn, I'm not even clicking Taunt. I kind of wish I was Substitute, but Taunt came up. I would say it snuck in a couple set wins. I remember an opponent just straight up like saw the team sheet and like assumed it was Hayes, didn't see I was Taunt on Palafin, so I was able to taunt their Amoonguss without like any issue. Um, I was able to use it in my top 8 set. It took me a game there, but I think it's really kind of preference on this slot. Like, I wouldn't have minded maybe like Ice Punch or a fighting move. I think depending on how people figure out how to play their matchups, you can see different move slots there. It doesn't have to be A's.
What matchups did Taunt really come up in? You mentioned your top 8 set. I forget who you played there.
Yeah, that was against Ufumezi. I was able to taunt his Amoonguss in the end game and then just double into his other slot back to back to win game 2. The other, I believe it was against Andrew Ding was the one who didn't know I had taunt and snuck in a game 3 win there. But it was another Murkrow player actually, day 2 I played, in which I was just taunting the Murkrow because I didn't want it to set up Tailwind and Sunny Day, and then I was able to just kind of overrun them with Ice Shards and Jet Punches without both of those being up.
Yeah, and
But otherwise, like that slot, like you can't have too much Amoonguss hate really. It's all over the place, so respecting Amoonguss is the way to go.
right, that is one thing I've noticed. A lot of Pal Smears, especially Amoonguss, is just the linchpin, and then with Palafins now, if you're dropping Haze, I mean Taunt Substitute, they both put in work against Amoonguss, and then I've also seen Terra Grass Palafin as another like piece of Amoonguss counterplay, and so Cedric, what was your experience with Substitute, and how did that impact your matchups?
Yeah, I think I lean when I was having indecision about one of the move slots on the team, I generally favored the original composition from Agadi. So he had Substitute, and I think Howl synergizes better with Substitute than it does Taunt. Because, in an ideal world where you have Jet Punch pressure onto an Arcanine, it's most likely going to switch out, and you're able to get a Howl Substitute up in that situation. But if you have Taunt, I feel like they can get punished far less from switching out in that situation. And so that was really the thought process for me there. Is it felt like it was synergized better with Howl and could put my opponents into trickier situations on turns where they usually would have a safe switch or safe intimidate cycling. But I think Taunt is definitely another way to circumvent Amoonguss, and probably more effective. But I think Sub is probably more generally practical.
Mm-hmm. I do want to mention, before people start trying this out, that Howl does not go through Substitute. If you set up Substitute with Palafin and then Howl, it will not work. But your speed tiers line up where your Arcanine is faster, so that does work for your team.
Yeah. Didn't make that mistake in tournament, thankfully. I was aware of it beforehand.
Yeah. And then, so, again, those slots, I guess, Taunt maybe a little more narrow, Substitute more generally applicable, but both kind of, I guess, fill the same role. And did you guys ever consider Terra Grass on Palafin, or was Terra Water always the choice?
I was testing Terra Grass with Haze, but I just missed the raw damage output from Terra Water too much, so I made that switch pretty early on.
I thought about it. I thought it was most effective in the mirror, but it really weakened you to other matchups. And even in the mirror, um, it felt more like a closed team sheet tool, where as soon as you Terragrass your Palafin, it's like, okay, cool. But if they preserve their Arcanine Terra to water or grass, like you're still kind of hosed.
Mhm.
Like more so even because now you just get Flare Blitzed. So I think the Haze set is definitely the most potent um, Terragrass Dondozo counter, but I don't think it holds up in most matchups.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess moving on to the next like difference that we saw the Arcanine, and so Cedric, you had Protect. Caleb, you had Extreme Speed, which is I think different from Agadi, who I believe had Protect on his team.
Hmm.
So talk to me about why you switched off of Protect onto Extreme Speed.
Honestly, I was actually testing no Will-O-Wisp for most of my ladder games. I just thought the way I was playing the team, just super in your face with how I enjoyed the pressure from extreme speed too much. I did when I knew that I wasn't running haze anymore. That's when I went Terragrass Wisp on Arc just to help with the Terragrass Dozo matchup. But extreme speed, it was just good to have that chip damage when I'm howling up and I'll be at like +1 and I'd soften it up for more priority in the back coming out from Ice Shard or Jet Punch. I believe in the 5-mon mirror against Randy last round of Swiss D2, I got up to like +4 Arcanine and just spammed extreme speed against his team. And he couldn't really do anything. So I enjoyed it for what it was, but there are definitely moments in which it's like, oh, I can't protect, and they know I can't protect. So there's some less, there's some shaky positioning that goes on, where my only protecting Pokemon are Baxcalibur and Palafin. Um, you kind of just have to know where your end game's at a little earlier on. You have less safety room there.
hmm I when I was testing out Palance, I found like I thought that with how I needed Extreme Speed, just because
Hmm.
and you just get all of a sudden now anything that's below like 40-50% health just kind of goes down. And Flare Blitz is also really good at putting things down to like 20-30%. Um, and so I was kind of surprised to see that Agadi had dropped Extreme Speed, and then Cedric, you had too. Did you like Protect? And did you ever miss Extreme Speed? And talk to me about the trade offs there.
I think uh, the decision to run Protect didn't had nothing to do with Arcanine and had more to do with Amoonguss. Because I didn't have Protect on Amoonguss, I thought, okay, now we have. If I run Extreme Speed on Arcanine, suddenly I have 4 Pokemon without Protect. My ability to position the positioning team gets a lot weaker. And so my thought process was, yeah, Extreme Speed might be nice, but I really think I need some ability to switch around position with Protect, and I think that was a good decision. For me personally, I think there could have been some synergy, like particularly with Ting Lu, Stone Edge into Iron Bundle and Extreme Speed. That's a calc that might have been useful, but a lot of the times I was just cleaning that up with, honestly, even Aqua Jet was getting there with Terra Water. I wouldn't have needed Terra Water with Jet Punch, but that's besides the point. I think another interesting call on Arcanine is the Terra type. Both Caleb and I switched off of Terra Flying, I believe it was, that Agati had, in favor of the more Dozo-centric Grass Terra. Um, I think the reason he had Flying Terra was most likely for Great Tusk, and look who Caleb's loss was, and look who won the
Yeah.
tournament. So maybe we favored the wrong. I mean, it was for certain it was useful. It's also weak, stronger into Palafin, but I think with Great Tusk usage taking up, the Terra Flying originally makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've definitely. I mean, obviously we saw it win. We saw. I think a lot of are the Garchomp or Great Tusk in day 2. Yeah, I think four
Mhm.
of those powerful offensive ground types in top 8. So uh, that is one of the things that people I think looked at and said this is something that Palance might be weak to, is like offensive ground types. and especially if you're not running like the Terrifying Roaring Moon that Paul was using, which is another like piece of counterplay that teams can have. Maybe the Dragon Knight that Nails was using on his EUIC team, and so yeah, it is really interesting to see how all these again all these small changes make huge differences in your how you have to approach these matchups. How did you approach the Great Tusk matchup with no Terraflying and Arcanine?
I just dodged them. I played one of them, and I lost to them. Like I might have played others, but they weren't. It was Great Tusk specifically, like the Scarf variant. Like you have the double super effective priority and Aqua Jet and Ice Shard, but I think it was the combination of Talon and Scarf that got me. But Great Tusk, it still has like a mediocre speed stat. It can be maneuvered around well enough, but I think it just also happens to populate on good teams that have other things that my team hates. So yeah,
Caleb,
simply
you
dodging that
even pulled
matchup.
over. You even pulled over to the dark side. You said Aqua Jet.
Oh, I said Aqua Jet. Oh no, I was looking at the screen. Yeah, Jet Punch, same thing. I'm
Fix
sure
that
Aqua
habit
Jet
before the
Ice
next
Shard gets the
tournament.
KO, right? Right?
No, no shot.
Yikes! All right,
Not even
so
close.
glad it was Jet Punch.
Cedric, did you have
I
the
do
name?
not have the resolve to have gotten as far as Cedric did with that. So
Look, who's stronger? Caleb with a Fisher and Jet Punch or Cedric with Aqua Jet and Stone Edge? Turns out, very thin margin.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, opponents. That was the difference.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add about the Great Tusk matchup, Cedric?
I think, yeah, it's a tough matchup. I don't think I played Choice Scarf. I played a couple Life Orb, which I was able to eke out with some good switches and just like well applied pressure. I think the Scarf isn't any better or worse than the Life Orb outside of you need Tailwind with the Life Orb to beat the team. Um, I think it was more so the supporting cast that, like Caleb said, Nails' Hail, Joe's King Gambit, I would say are particularly difficult, and then Nails Dragonite is probably an issue, in addition to the Hail.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, Mezzi's Sun Murkrow I think is a big issue as well. But yeah, the options are few and far between. You kind of want a Mungus to spore it. You'd like to intimidate it, maybe, but obviously you don't like switching in there. You kind of have to thread in a Dazzling Gleam or something if Sun's up. It's a pretty difficult Pokemon to handle for the team.
All right. Well, if you're looking for a team for Hartford and you're trying to beat Palance, I guess you got some ideas right here. And then I guess last but not least, the other difference that you guys had was the last move on Tinglu, where Cedric you had Stone Edge, and then Caleb you had Fissure. So I guess I forget what Agati originally had on this team, but
I was Stone Edge.
oh wait, oh no wait, what? You were Stone Edge? Yeah.
No. I'm talking Agati was Stone
Oh,
Edge. I
Agati was Stone
Fisher,
Edge.
yes.
Got you. Yeah. So why did you make that change?
I was testing with Stone Edge. I didn't like getting walled by Gyarados, but I felt like I was winning or losing those matchups regardless of if Tinglu was getting damage off on Gyarados or not. I was just gonna Ruination it in most cases, but without Stone Edge, it means I couldn't get the knockout off. But I patched in Fisher because there were too many matchups I felt like it was a good escape button I needed because in testing like certain mouse ape compositions, if I'm just like Terra Water Tinglu, I can just get off a bunch of Fissures off and like maybe some hit. Most are just boosting Stomping Tantrum. So I believe I tried to keep tally. I think I was 5 for 10 on Fissure throughout the tournament. 3 of which were all in one set, and they all hit. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
it won me a matchup that I did not think the team had the resources to win otherwise, so I can't complain about its addition in my run.
I know Sohai came on the channel after his EOIC run and talked about we were talking about Fissure, and I think he hit like 4 out of 6 fissures as well. And I'm like, yeah, like Fissure, and he wants to stop talking about how it's a good move, and if you're gonna hit 50% of them, then it's a really good move.
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah, okay. Cedric, what are your thoughts on Fissure?
I don't respect it or Caleb for using cheat moves like Fissure, Extreme Speed, and Jet Punch. It's a loser mentality. No. I think Fissure has its places on teams. Honestly, I don't think it has a place on this team. I thought Stone Edge was fantastic. It really patched up the Iron Bundle matchup because if you hit the Iron Bundle, Caleb's Tinglu has to 3-hit KO Iron Bundle, mine can 2-hit KO it, and that 1 turn difference is very, very important when it can super affect most of your defensive core. So yeah, that's I think the main strength of Stone Edge. Of course, if you hit it, again, kind of similar to Fissure, I guess you could just hit your Fissures instead of hitting
Right. Have you
your
considered
Stone Edges.
that the U2 shot the Iron Bundle 65% of the time, and he one shots it after 2 turns 50% of the time. So
True.
like on average, I think you kill it around the same rate.
Maybe, but I
Maybe.
definitely valued the consistency of Stone Edge. It was also useful into Talon Flame teams, being able to again handle Dragonite in 2 turns, Ruination into Stone Edge. Similar with Gyarados. I think it was just really appreciated coverage, and it was a lot more threatening in team preview against teams with flying types, which otherwise, or defensive flying types, like where a Dragonite or a Gyarados could wall a lot of the team. Suddenly you have a bit more added pressure. Also, random Terra-flying Pokemon, useful against King Gambit. Yeah. I really like Stone Edge. I would run it again. I definitely wouldn't run Fissure. But it worked for Caleb. He went a little higher than average, and it ended up being pretty important in a key point of his run. So definitely don't blame his bias for it.
It's not even a bias. I just last minute went to it. Like I was mostly testing Stone Age, so I could see myself if I was ready with better game plans into certain teams with Stone Edge, I probably would have stuck with it. But I think that was like a little gap of my prep matchup wise, in which I'm like, Fissure might bail me out here rather than me stressing out about figuring out the lines with Stone Edge.
Game plans are a vice, and we should steer clear of them to maintain maximum fluidity of mind.
Right. Just like Jet Punch. And so I mean those are the differences in the team. And that being said, I think that you do, again, this is such a flexible team. You can really adapt it to whatever metagame call you have. I guess the main Pokemon that I think has a lot of flexibility that we didn't talk about is the Fluttermane, because you guys both ran choice specs. You guys run the same attacks too. Yeah, you did. And so Fluttermane, of course, not only can have a huge variety in EV spreads, it can go basically any speed stat it wants to. From I think Agati was like 165 speed or something crazy like that. It looks like you were a little faster than that. Or you can go max speed timid even. You can run booster energy. You can run focus sash. You have all these different choices on it. Talk to me about why you trained the Fluttermane the way you guys did.
Can I start on this?
Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead.
Cool. So, because I do not support the speed creep economy, these are not my actual speeds or spreads for the most part. These are all generally strong spreads, but I will not be revealing my spreads because I will not contribute to this slow creeping up of EV spreads, EV points in speed. Unless you subscribe to my Patreon, each tier, $5, $10, etc., I give you a paste with 8 more speed EVs. So, yeah, DM me for that. But I actually did end up running a pretty bulky Fluttermane. I'm not going to of course, they'll use speed. But the Arcanine is the only spread that is actually correct, oddly enough. Max speed adamant, and I ran this. Sorry, I'm completely going off the question.
Go
But
ahead. You can ramble. I don't care.
It's relevant.
people were running Jolly max speed at Dragonite, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm gonna outspeed that pretty much after I got outsped one time on ladder, and that's all that spread is. But my Flutter Mane was pretty defensive overall, and yeah, no comment outside of that.
Sure. I guess choice specs is the main part that I think has a lot of variables. Again, I think there's like 4 or 5 different items it can feasibly run. Were you always set on choice specs?
Me personally, yeah, I tend to play my Flutter Mane in a way where I switch it out. I like to lead it. I'm fine switching it out and getting it back in. I feel like I find myself in those positions the way I play pretty often. And Booster Energy, which was probably my second choice, didn't allow me to do that as much. It really made me use Flutter as more of an end game tool instead of an early game tool, which kind of just felt contrary to how I wanted to play the team.
As for me, I was testing. I was only actually testing choice specs just because of my familiarity with it. I was testing like max speed, no bulk, but I ended up just going back with a spread that was just in my box that I've been using since Knoxville. Since I felt like in moments where I can't really like think too much about how much damage things are gonna do, having that comfort of having a spread that you've been working with for a while helps kind of seed benchmarks from opposing Pokemon's damage on the rest of your party. So I just stuck with that and, made sure I outsped Chi-Yu.
That
Good Pokemon outspeed.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Gotti didn't outspeed Chi-Yu in like top 4 at the UIC, and Lex was on the channel saying that if he had known that, that matchup might have been totally different. So I do think that's something that you probably have to outspeed. But yeah,
I can't believe he didn't. That's like what, 20 EVs,
Yeah.
24. Come on, you just gotta outspeed that one, bud.
yeah.
Those 24 are not making, whatever.
So
I have a lot
Mina-
of opinions on like random cutoff speed tiers, and usually the opinion is just hit them.
Yeah.
It's a couple EVs.
I mean, the thing about Flutter Mane is that you keep looking at a couple EVs, like, well, just outspeed Chi-Yu. Okay, yeah, but just outspeed, like, Jolly Garchomp. And, just outspeed +2 Adamant Dozo. And then, just outspeed, it just keeps going up. So, like you said, there is a lot of speed creep. And at some point, you have to say that I value the bulk or I value the damage. And it is really hard to EV a Flutter Mane. Like you said, this isn't your actual EV spread. There's also a lot of defensive benchmarks because it has such a low defense stat. And so I guess we're not going to talk too much about that, but there is a lot of nuance to that that maybe could be its own video in, on its own. But moving on from that topic, I guess I think we've covered most of the Pokemon and how they're trained. Do you guys have any other like serious inflection points or decisions you had to make while you were team building that you want to talk about?
Protect would have been pretty swag on Amoonguss, considering I didn't play any Dozo. But really, you got to have that one covered. So I don't regret any of the choices on the team except for my negligence in submitting my Palafin.
I did play a Terragrass Dozo, so I was glad I had the clear smog. But as far as like the Palafin slot, I might consider Haze because I did run to my loss right away day 2. I think you just had him on the channel as a Steel Lum Dozo
Kalen?
player. Yeah. And like I played out of my mind game 1 just to lose to back-to-back double rock slide flinches to not like burn Spore through his Lum, but then game 2 they just recognized that you just lead the Steel Lum Dozo and I fold. I can't break it without the Haze. So there's still room to like go back and forth. It like the whole Dozo metagame of like the ability changes, the item changes, terror changes. It's something you just need to recognize going into any given tournament and make sure you're ready for it.
Yeah, I
To
mean
get your
that
fishers on the Gozo.
true.
Mm.
Uh, so okay, and then I guess let's talk about some of the game plans that you had. I know Caleb, you just mentioned that you didn't really have game plans going into the tournament or a ton of them, but
I had some.
okay. Well, let's talk about them. Let's talk about some of the matchups that you kind of had planned out and how you approach some of the more common things you expected to face.
Sure. I say I had some. I had click howl and have stronger buttons than my opponent. That's basically how I went through day one. I mean, I started off 0-1 facing off Alberto in a matchup that I didn't see as winnable in any regard. But Cedric proved me wrong later that day. So, but as far as just game plans, it's balance. Like you choose the Pokemon that are best into the matchup. Like Tinglu, I think I only really brought into Chiyu stuff. I'm really like into Baxcalibur. Like even in matchups where it looks like it might be doing much, like +1 Glaive Rush is gonna pick up an important knockout somewhere along the way.
I did have someone in my group chat, not going to name names, you post yesterday saying, "Did you know that you can howl and then glaive rush and it just kills things?" baby's first balance team. So yeah, that is just that is a very powerful strategy.
Yeah, typically just getting the protect or like you just gotta read them. You gotta get the read right.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how I was playing the team, having less protects than Cedric for proper positioning.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Cedric, did you have more structured game plans going into the tournament?
The short answer is no. I had kind of tools that I would lean on in more typical matchups. For example, like against a more offensive, like Talon plus Flutter plus Chi-Yu type of archetype, I would lean on Palafin with Jet Punch plus the AV Tinglu to kind of give me some defensive cover and kind of just pick off knockouts. But I definitely didn't have like defined leads or defined four that I was going to bring. I kind of just had pieces in my head that I knew were good into common cores, and I kind of prefer to keep it that way. Like I sort of joked before, but I do think in metagames that aren't yet as centralized, it can be wasteful of your mental energy to try and prepare really dedicated game plans, and so I kind of mostly played by the seat of my pants.
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, not having Chop Punch certainly would have shaken up some of those game plans anyways, so probably for the better. But yeah, I guess let's move on to the tournament experience itself. And so, again, you guys both had really, really incredible runs. You both have the same record at 10 or 11-3. And then Caleb, you, of course, made top cut. I guess let's go with Cedric first. Do you want to highlight 2 or 3 matches from your tournament run?
Sure. Let me run through them in my head.
I can pull them up, I think.
Yeah. So I think what was I? I played Alberto at 3-1 in a set that I think he wins most of the time. But game 2, I got a pretty lucky paralysis on my Thunderbolts into his Corviknight as he just really hard read me turn 1, Terrified in front of my Arcanine. I mean, it wasn't so hard of a read. It was kind of a lazy play on my part, but he covered it well. But I was sort of bailed out by a Thunderbolt paralysis, which let me win later in the game. And then game 3, I was able to I wouldn't call it clean. I got what felt like favorable sleep turns. He called game 3 pretty clean though. But game 1 he cleaned my clock. So that was sort of the trend as well, because I'll also highlight my last round against Gavin Michaels. Game 1 was pretty close to a 4-0, I think, if not a 4-0. and then I was able to win games 2 and 3 because Among Us, Terra Steel Among Us in Rain is pretty much a nightmare for the team to beat. So I decided to not beat it and instead led Arcanine Fluttermane into Pelipper Among Us and just will-o-wisp the Fluttermane and tried to make the matchup work from there. And I was able to take games 2 and game 3 off of that, I think he probably should have won that game most of the time, but he made a poor decision on his usage of Terra in both of the games that allowed me to win.
Yeah, that was the last round of day 2, right?
Yeah, that was the quote unquote win and in. I think
Yeah.
Gavin actually would have made it, but um, I won and ultimately just missed.
You can blame Gavin's opponents for that. And then, Caleb, did you have a couple matches that you wanted to talk about from your tournament run?
I was trying to think. Looking at who I played, definitely have to highlight the Randy match because him having essentially essentially a mirror, but he had a Zoomerl instead of Palafin, and him, to his credit, um, having 6 Terra Water Pokemon was pretty huge that he like got that far with it. But I felt like that gave me the edge in the matchup because I just knew like he didn't have defensive Terras that were like resisting big hits into me. Um, I remember game 1 I threw at the end because just a mental lapse where I needed to get a KO on a low on Moongus and then Thunderbolt the Zoomeril, but it was Terra Water, so I was gonna Ice Shard, but I'm like last minute I'm like, no, I can't Ice Shard at the Glaive Rush, not remembering the reason I was trying to Ice Shard was because of the priority. So Thunderbolt went into the Moongus, and then Glaive Rush went into the Zoomeril. But I was able to come back game 2 and 3. It was also he terrored his Azumarill game 2, and I was able to Glaive Rush it then. So it was a fun kind of back and forth, but knowing that regardless of what he was going to Terra, that my Flutter and Glaive Rush bot backs were just going to pull through was pretty impactful for me. I would say watching my top 8 match against Mezzi's pretty big. I feel like I looked at some of the turns earlier today. I think we both were playing kind of awkward. I was too geared towards their Golden Go game plan because I feel like redirection plus the bulkier Terra Water Golden Goes is really difficult for our team to break through. It's how I lost to James Beck day 1, where he had Mousehold next to it. But yeah, I'd say those 2 were the big ones, big meaningful matchups that did not involve me clicking Fisher.
Yeah, fair enough. And so those are all the questions that I had. I guess before we wrap things up, were there any other things that related to Palance, all the nuances that we were talking about that Caleb, you were so excited to talk about, and Cedric, you were not. Anything else that you guys wanted to talk about Palance, how to build it, how to play it?
You don't have to build it; it exists. Just find it.
True.
You know, there's it's been played plenty. I feel like the day 2 representation, there were only 4 Palafin, like huge drop. But I think you might not need to care for it as much because more teams are finding the weaknesses into it. But also, like most of the like top Palafin balanced players, either the ones that were at this tournament weren't running it, or they weren't at the tournament. So I feel like maybe going forward at regionals or even just there's more Palance players in Europe. I feel like Palafin's usage has to spike back up. I think this is just a case of this being a West Coast event and the players being a little different here.
Cedric, would you recommend someone use or at least like closely look at Palance for like maybe Hartford or Malmo regionals?
Definitely not. I think the Palafin, and take this with a grain of salt because of Aquajet, is the weakest part of the team at this point in the metagame. I think that's a large portion of what the opposing or what the metagame counterplay has started to revolve around is dealing with the Palafin as well as the Fluttermane, and I think the Palafin is obviously has such a large drawback in needing to switch out. It's so much more easily exploitable than the Fluttermane. I think if you're looking for a team for the upcoming regionals, I think your best bet is actually to look at why Palafin was not in the top slots. Look at Hale. Look at the Water Goldangos. Look at all that stuff. Look at the Sunny Day Murkrow. And maybe build off of those. And if you're not doing that, then you better come in with some creative solutions to those because the current Palafin compositions will not cut it in the next coming months. It has to evolve, or no, it's not going to do so hot. I think there's some level of player difference that you're able to achieve, but there are going to be matchups soon that are not surmountable. I think Nails' team is a good example of that, and a lot of the Hail teams where on some level you might be able to player diff the leads, but the back Pokemon will clean you out just as easily. So yeah, overall I am pretty bearish on Palance as a core. But an Iron Bundle in that slot, other Pokemon over the Palafin, I think there's other water types. People prove that. Azumarill. There's a lot of innovation to be had, but in its current state, I would not recommend it.
Caleb, would you agree?
He put it so eloquently. Like, yeah, I even before the tournament, I was considering dropping Palafin. It just didn't feel as impactful. It got me through a lot of matches day one, but I feel like future tournaments I might not be so fortunate into pulling the kind of easier Palafin matchups.
All right. Well, I mean, one of the things I will say is that the really cool thing about just the Fire, Water, Grass, Fluttermane core, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Palafin, is that you do have a ton of flexibility in your move slots and your Terra types items, and in your last two Pokemon. And so, while maybe definitely try this team out. I can't say you shouldn't, but also I think that the goal of this was to kind of talk about the individual choices and how it makes a difference. And I think that there is a lot of flexibility that you can utilize with this team to try to find those creative solutions to new metagame threats that are especially targeting this type of team. And so I wouldn't write Palance off yet, but I definitely agree that it is being targeted down, and you have to evaluate how people are trying to beat Palance, and what it has to do and what has to change for it to be a little more resilient to those teams. Yeah, and so on that note, did you guys have any final words or shoutouts that you want to give? Caleb?
Shoutouts to my friends for just forcing me to stick to a team. That's always my hardest. Always the hardest part for me. But then, like, I actually get results, so I don't know why it's hard for me to just stick with a team. I should do it more. I don't know. Maybe you two at home stick with a team can end up getting 8th at a regional.
Shout out to Agati for really killing it on the UIC stream and pretty much inspiring me to take up the team. The team isn't easy to use, but he definitely brought out the potential of it on stream and inspired me to use it. And shout out to Raghav, who definitely influenced a lot of the EV spreads for the team, some of which I think were really important in the success of the team and the run overall.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both for coming on the channel and talking about your choices, talking about the team. I really appreciate it. Congratulations on your really incredible runs at Portland Regionals. And yeah, until next time, I will see you all later.